The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clanged against the concrete floor of my garage. From the kitchen window above, I could hear Vanessa's voice drifting through the cool October air, sweet as honey and twice as fake. "Oh, Patrick, you're so bad," she giggled into her phone. "I can't wait to see what you have in mind for our next meeting." I froze under the hood of my beat-up Ford pickup. In 15 years of marriage, Vanessa had never used that tone with me. Hell, she barely spoke to me anymore unless it was to complain about our mortgage or ask when I was going to finally get serious about my career. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name's Colin Harper, and I'm what you might call professionally invisible. I fix computer networks for small businesses around Buffalo, New York. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps me in beer money. Vanessa, on the other hand, sells pharmaceutical samples to doctors' offices. She makes twice what I do and never lets me forget it. That sounds delicious," she continued, her voice dropping to a sultry whisper. "I'll bring the samples you requested, the special ones." I wiped my hands on an old rag and crept closer to the window. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see her pacing around our dated kitchen, twirling a strand of her blonde hair around her finger like some teenager with a crush. "No, Colin's out in the garage playing with his truck again. He won't bother us." Playing with my truck? I'd been fixing the transmission she'd been complaining about for 3 weeks. And who the hell was Patrick? "You're right, we should be more careful," she said, glancing toward the window. I ducked down behind my toolbox. "But it's so hard when you make me feel so appreciated." The kitchen light clicked off, and I heard her footsteps heading upstairs. I stayed crouched behind my tools for another 5 minutes, my mind racing. Vanessa was having an affair. The signs had been there for months. The late meetings, the new clothes, the way she'd started going to the gym religiously and actually caring about her appearance again. But hearing it confirmed felt like taking a sledgehammer to the chest. I pulled out my phone and opened our joint banking app. If she was meeting this Patrick character, she'd have to pay for it somehow. Sure enough, scrolling through the recent charges, I found what I was looking for. The Sunset Motel, charged to our credit card 3 times in the past 2 weeks. $59 each time. "Snake," I muttered. The Sunset Motel was a dive on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. I'd driven past it 1,000 times and never given it a second thought. Now it felt like the center of my universe. I heard the shower turn on upstairs. Vanessa was getting cleaned up, probably washing off the scent of another man before climbing into bed next to me. The thought made my stomach churn. But instead of rage, I felt something else creeping in. Curiosity. Who was Patrick? How long had this been going on? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? I'm not the kind of guy who throws punches or makes scenes. I'm methodical, patient. When a network crashes, you don't just start unplugging cables randomly. You trace the problem back to its source, identify every component that's been compromised, and then you fix it systematically. This was just another system that needed debugging. I grabbed my laptop from the workbench and fired it up. If Vanessa thought she was being clever, she was about to learn that her husband knew a thing or two about digital forensics. Her phone was still connected to our home Wi-Fi, and like most people, she'd never bothered to change the default settings on her cloud backup. Within 20 minutes, I had access to her text messages, photos, and email. What I found made me want to throw my laptop against the wall. Hundreds of messages between her and someone named Patrick Lane, photos I never wanted to see, plans for meetings, discussions about hotel rooms, and worst of all, conversations about me. "Colin's so pathetic," she'd written just 3 days ago. "He has no ambition, no drive. He'll probably be fixing computers in that garage until he fades. I deserve better than this." Patrick's response was even worse. "Don't worry, baby. Once I get promoted to regional director, we can make this official. A woman like you belongs with a winner, not some loser who can't even afford to fix his own truck." I sat in my garage until 3 in the morning, reading every message, studying every photo, building a timeline of their affair. By the time I finally dragged myself to bed, I had a complete picture of what had been happening behind my back. Vanessa and Patrick had been screwing around for 4 months. He was her district supervisor at the pharmaceutical company, married with 2 kids of his own. They'd been meeting at the Sunset Motel twice a week, and according to their messages, they were planning to leave their spouses after Patrick's promotion came through. But here's the thing they didn't know about me. I don't get mad. I get even. The next morning, Vanessa sat across from me at our kitchen table, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. She'd put on her favorite red dress, the one that hugged her curves in all the right places and done her makeup with extra care. "You're up early," she said without looking at me. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, buttering my toast with deliberate calm. "Hey, I noticed some charges on our credit card. The Sunset Motel? What's that about?" Her hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. For just a second, I saw panic flash across her face before she recovered her composure. "Oh, that. I had to book a room for a client from out of town. His company's covering it, but they reimburse us later." 3 times in 2 weeks? Must be a very important client." "He is." Her voice had an edge now. "Some of us are actually trying to advance our careers, Colin. Not everyone's content to stay stuck in the same hopeless job forever." I nodded thoughtfully, taking another bite of toast. "You're absolutely right. Speaking of careers, how's Patrick doing these days?" This time she couldn't hide her reaction. Her coffee cup slipped from her fingers and clattered against the saucer, and splashing brown liquid across the white tablecloth. "Patrick? Patrick who?" "Patrick Lane, your district supervisor, the one you've been texting at all hours of the night." Her face went pale, then flushed red. "Are you spying on me now? Going through my phone?" "I don't need to go through your phone, sweetheart. You left your laptop open last night with your messages displayed. Very romantic stuff, by the way, especially the part where you called me pathetic." Vanessa stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. "You have no right to read my private conversations. And you have no right to screw your boss on my credit card." I kept my voice level, almost conversational. "But here we are." She opened her mouth to deny it, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "We'll talk about this later," she said. "I'm late for work." "Give Patrick my regards," I called after her. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. I finished my breakfast in peace, then drove to Murphy's boxing gym on the east side of town. I'd been going there 3 times a week for the past 2 years, partly for exercise and partly because Ray Murphy was the closest thing I had to a therapist. Ray was in his 60s, built like a fire hydrant, with hands like catcher's mitts and a face that had seen too many fights. He'd owned the gym for 30 years and had a way of cutting through bullshit that I found comforting. "You look like hell," he said when I walked in. "Feel worse." I started wrapping my hands for the heavy bag. "Caught my wife cheating." Ray didn't even blink. "What are you going to do about it?" "Still working on that." "Well, whatever you're planning, don't do anything stupid. Prison orange ain't your color." I spent the next hour beating the hell out of the heavy bag, working through my anger and frustration with each punch. By the time I finished, I had the beginnings of a plan. That afternoon, I drove to the Sunset Motel and parked across the street behind a dumpster. I didn't have to wait long. At 2:47 p.m., Vanessa's silver Honda pulled into the parking lot, followed 30 seconds later by a black BMW. The man who got out of the BMW was everything I wasn't, tall, tanned, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. He had the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, the swagger of someone who'd always gotten what he wanted. Patrick Lane, regional director in waiting, home wrecker. They met at the door of room 237, kissing passionately before disappearing inside. I took photos with my phone, noting the timestamps and license plate numbers. Then I settled in to wait. They emerged an hour and 20 minutes later, both looking satisfied and disheveled. Patrick straightened his tie while Vanessa smoothed down her dress. They kissed again before getting into their separate cars. But before they could leave, I made my move. I jogged across the street and approached Patrick's BMW. He was checking his hair in the rearview mirror and didn't notice me until I knocked on his window. "Excuse me," I said when he rolled it down. "Are you Patrick Lane?" "Yeah, who's asking?" "Colin Harper, Vanessa's husband." The color drained from his face. He started to roll up the window, but I grabbed the top of the glass. "Relax, Patrick. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to meet the man who's been keeping my wife so satisfied. Look, I don't know what you think you know, but I know you've been screwing my wife in cheap motel rooms for 4 months. I know you think I'm a pathetic loser who doesn't deserve her. And I know you're planning to leave your own wife and kids to run away with her." Patrick's jaw worked silently for several seconds. Then he found his voice. "What do you want?" I smiled. "Nothing, yet, but Patrick, this isn't over, not by a long shot." I stepped back from the car and watched him speed away, tires squealing on the asphalt. Vanessa had already left, probably racing back to the office to warn him. Let her. The game was just beginning. Over the next week, I watched Vanessa's world start to crack around the edges. She became paranoid, jumping every time her phone buzzed, checking the locks on our doors obsessively. She'd catch me watching her and demand to know what I was thinking, but I just smiled and went back to whatever I was doing. The uncertainty was eliminating her, and I was loving every minute of it. Meanwhile, I'd been doing my homework on Patrick Lane. A few discreet inquiries with mutual acquaintances at the company revealed some interesting information. He wasn't just cheating on his wife with Vanessa. He had a reputation as a serial womanizer who used his position to pressure female employees into relationships. More importantly, he'd been falsifying expense reports for years, billing personal trips and entertainment to the company. I'd found evidence of it in his email account, which I'd accessed using a password he'd foolishly shared in one of his messages to Vanessa. On Thursday morning, I made an anonymous call to the company's ethics hotline, providing detailed information about Patrick's expense account fraud. By Thursday afternoon, he'd been suspended pending investigation. Vanessa came home that night in a panic. "They suspended Patrick," she said, pacing around our living room like a caged animal. "Someone reported him for expense account fraud." "That's terrible," I said, not looking up from my newspaper. "I hope he has a good lawyer." "You did this, didn't you?" "Did what?" "Don't play dumb with me, Colin. You reported him." I folded my newspaper and looked at her with mock concern. "Sweetheart, I don't even know what Patrick's job responsibilities are. How could I possibly know about his expense accounts?" She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for some sign of deception, but I'd had years of practice hiding my emotions from her. "This isn't over," she said finally. "No," I agreed. "It's not." The next day, I put phase 2 of my plan into motion. I discovered that Vanessa's best friend Amy Torres worked in human resources at a different pharmaceutical company. More importantly, Amy had been feeding information to Vanessa about how to handle the Patrick situation, coaching her on what to say if anyone asked questions. But Amy had her own secrets. A little digging revealed that she'd been fired from my old company 5 years ago for harassment. She blamed me for it, claiming I'd been the one who reported her inappropriate behavior toward a male coworker. She was right. I had reported her, and now she was using Vanessa to get back at me. I called Amy's current employer and had an interesting conversation with their HR director. It turned out they'd never been told about Amy's previous termination. She'd lied on her application and forged her references. By Monday morning, Amy Torres was unemployed again. Vanessa found out Tuesday evening and came at me like a fury. "You bastard!" she screamed, throwing her purse at my head. "Amy lost her job because of you." "Amy lost her job because she's a lying, manipulative predator," I replied calmly, just like her best friend. "I am not." "You're screwing your married boss in cheap motels and lying about it. What would you call that?" She slapped me, hard. The sound echoed through our kitchen like a gunshot. I touched my cheek and smiled. "Feel better?" "Go to hell, Colin." "I'm already there, sweetheart. Have been for years. But the good news is, I'm not staying much longer." That night, Vanessa packed a bag and went to stay with her sister. She left a note saying she needed space to think about our marriage. I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. Then I opened a bottle of beer and got back to work. With Vanessa out of the house, I had free rein to accelerate my plans. I'd been patient, methodical, building my case piece by piece, but now it was time to make the decisive move. First, I dealt with Patrick. His suspension had been extended while the company investigated the expense account fraud, but he was still drawing salary. That seemed unfair, considering what he'd done to my marriage. I'd been monitoring his email and discovered he was planning to meet with his lawyer at a downtown bar called the Brass Monkey. Perfect. I arrived early and claimed a table near the back, where I could observe without being seen. Patrick showed up 20 minutes later, looking haggard and desperate. His lawyer was a thin, nervous man in an expensive suit who kept checking his watch. "They're going to fire me," Patrick was saying as I activated the voice recorder on my phone. 20 years with the company, and they're going to throw me away over some paperwork discrepancies. "The evidence is pretty damning," his lawyer replied. "Falsified receipts, personal charges on company cards, unauthorized travel expenses. We might be looking at criminal charges if they decide to pursue it." "It's not about the money. This is personal. That psycho husband of Vanessa's is behind this somehow." I smiled. He was right, but he'd never be able to prove it. "Speaking of Vanessa," the lawyer continued, "you need to cut all contact with her immediately. If they find out about the affair, it'll make everything worse." "I can't just abandon her. We're in love." "You're in legal jeopardy. Love is a luxury you can't afford right now." I listened to them plot damage control strategies for another hour, recording everything. Then I followed Patrick to the parking lot. "Rough night?" I asked, stepping out of the shadows behind his car. Patrick spun around, his face twisting with rage. "You snake! You did this to me." "Did what? I'm just a guy who fixes computers, remember? Too pathetic to be a threat to a winner like you. I know it was you who reported me. I know you're behind Amy getting fired. What do you want? I want my life back. But since that's impossible, I'll settle for watching yours fall apart. Patrick took a swing at me. I'd been expecting it and ducked easily, letting his momentum carry him past me. He stumbled and fell against his car, scraping his cheek on the side mirror. Careful, Patrick. Assault charges won't help your legal situation. He straightened up, breathing hard. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. I walked away, leaving him standing in the parking lot bleeding from his cheek. Tomorrow, I'd send copies of his recorded conversation to the company's board of directors. By the end of the week, he'd be facing criminal charges. But I wasn't done with Vanessa yet. She'd been staying with her sister Karen, who lived in a trendy apartment complex on the north side of town. I'd been monitoring Vanessa's social media posts and knew she was planning to attend a pharmaceutical industry networking event Thursday night at the downtown Marriott. It was time for our final confrontation. I arrived at the hotel early and positioned myself near the bar where I could watch the entrance. The event was in full swing when Vanessa walked in, wearing a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before. She looked beautiful, confident, like she didn't have a care in the world. She was about to. I waited until she was engaged in conversation with a group of potential clients, then approached the group with a friendly smile. "Excuse me," I said to the man Vanessa was talking to. "I couldn't help but notice you were speaking with my wife." Vanessa's face went white. "Colin, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to meet your new friends. Tell them about your innovative sales techniques." "We should go," she said quickly, grabbing my arm. "Oh, don't leave on my account," I said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "I was just telling everyone how dedicated you are to customer service, going above and beyond to satisfy your clients' needs." "Stop it," she hissed. "Did you know she provides private consultations at the Sunset Motel? Very hands-on approach to pharmaceutical sales." The group was staring now, sensing drama. Other conversations were stopping as people turned to listen. "You're drunk," Vanessa said desperately. "Please, just go home." "I'm stone sober, sweetheart. Clear-headed for the first time in months, actually." I turned to the group. "My wife's been conducting business with her supervisor, Patrick Lane. Unfortunately, Patrick's been suspended for embezzlement, so I'm not sure how reliable his purchase orders are going to be." Vanessa tried to pull me away, but I stood my ground. "The thing about my wife," I continued, "is that she's very goal-oriented. She'll do whatever it takes to close a deal, absolutely whatever it takes." "That's enough," Vanessa shouted. The entire room was watching now. Conversations had faded completely, and all eyes were on us. "You want to do this here?" I asked quietly. "In front of all your colleagues and clients?" She looked around at the staring faces, realizing she was trapped. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to tell everyone the truth. About Patrick, about the motel rooms, about how you've been selling more than pharmaceutical samples." "I won't do that." "Then I will." I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery, holding it up so the nearest table could see the pictures I'd taken at the motel. "Colin, please," she whispered, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Too late for please, Vanessa. You made your choice? Now live with the consequences." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the room as whispers and pointing started around her. By tomorrow morning, everyone in the pharmaceutical industry would know about her affair with Patrick Lane. Her career was over, her reputation was destroyed, and I was just getting started. The final phase of my plan required perfect timing and absolute precision. I'd spent weeks setting up the dominoes, and now it was time to watch them fall. The pharmaceutical company's annual awards gala was scheduled for the following Saturday at the Grand Buffalo Convention Center. It was the biggest event of the year, with representatives from dozens of companies, local media coverage, and several prominent city officials in attendance. Vanessa would be there. She had to be. Her contract required attendance at major industry events, and she was still technically employed pending the investigation into her relationship with Patrick. Patrick would be there too. Despite his suspension, he was still fighting the charges and maintaining his innocence. His lawyer had advised him to show up and act like nothing was wrong, projecting confidence and normalcy. They were both about to learn that some mistakes can't be undone. I'd spent the week preparing my presentation, not a PowerPoint or a speech, but something much more devastating. A complete digital record of their affair, Patrick's embezzlement, and Amy's involvement in covering it up. I'd also made some new friends. It turned out that Patrick's wife Jennifer was a lovely woman who'd been completely unaware of her husband's infidelities. When I'd anonymously sent her copies of the motel photos and text messages, she'd been devastated. but she'd also been grateful to finally understand why her marriage had been falling apart. Jennifer was a family law attorney with connections throughout the city's legal community. She'd been very interested in my evidence of Patrick's financial crimes and had passed the information along to some colleagues in the district attorney's office. By Saturday morning, there was a warrant out for Patrick's arrest on embezzlement charges. He didn't know it yet, but he'd be taken into custody the moment he showed up at the gala. I arrived at the convention center early, wearing my best suit and a confident smile. I'd purchased a ticket weeks ago, back when I was still pretending to be the supportive husband who might attend his wife's work events. The ballroom was magnificent, with crystal chandeliers and elegant table settings. A stage at the front featured a podium where various industry leaders would give speeches throughout the evening. I found my assigned table and settled in to wait. Vanessa arrived at 7:30, looking nervous and uncomfortable. She'd lost weight over the past week, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She sat at a table near the front with her remaining colleagues, the ones who hadn't completely shunned her after the networking event incident. Patrick showed up 20 minutes later, playing the role of the confident executive who had nothing to hide. He worked the room, shaking hands and making small talk, but I could see the strain in his face. At 8:15, the program began with a welcome speech from the Industry Association president. Various awards were presented, deals were announced, and everyone pretended to be having a wonderful time. At 9:30, they opened the floor for announcements and special recognitions. That was my cue. I stood up and walked toward the stage, my heart pounding but my resolve absolute. The master of ceremonies looked confused as I approached the podium. "Excuse me, sir, but we haven't called for—" "I have an important announcement regarding industry ethics and professional standards," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the room through the microphone system. The room fell silent. Vanessa was staring at me in horror from her table. Patrick had gone pale and was looking toward the exits. "My name is Colin Harper," I began, "and I'm here tonight to talk about accountability." I pulled out a tablet and connected it to the room's projection system. The large screens around the ballroom lit up with the first image, a photo of Vanessa and Patrick kissing outside the Sunset Motel. Gasps echoed through the room. Someone screamed. Vanessa buried her face in her hands. 3 months ago, I discovered that my wife, Vanessa Harper of MedTech Solutions, was having an affair with her supervisor, Patrick Lane of Regional Pharmaceutical Distribution. More photos appeared on the screens, text messages, expense reports, hotel receipts. What started as a personal betrayal led me to uncover a pattern of professional misconduct that I believe this industry needs to address. Patrick was pushing through the crowd toward the stage, his face twisted with rage. But hotel security had been alerted and moved to intercept him. "Mr. Lane has been using his position to coerce female employees into private relationships," I continued. "He's also been embezzling company funds through falsified expense reports and fraudulent billing practices." The screen showed copies of Patrick's doctored receipts and forged travel vouchers, along with email evidence of his other affairs. Furthermore, this misconduct was enabled by Amy Torres of Pharmaceutical HR Services, who has been helping to cover up complaints and silence victims. More documents appeared. Amy's falsified employment records, evidence of her previous termination, and recordings of her conversations with Vanessa about managing the scandal. I'm sharing this information tonight because I believe this industry deserves better. You deserve leaders who are ethical, honest, and accountable for their actions. Patrick had broken free from security and was charging toward the stage. But as he reached the steps, 3 police officers appeared and surrounded him. "Patrick Lane," one of them announced loudly, "you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud." The room erupted in chaos as Patrick was handcuffed and led away. Reporters who'd been covering the event were frantically taking photos and making phone calls. Vanessa was sobbing at her table, surrounded by colleagues who were either comforting her or keeping their distance. I stepped back from the podium and looked out over the crowd. The screens were still displaying the evidence of their crimes, and people were taking photos with their phones to share on social media. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone one final time, "that's what accountability looks like." I walked off the stage and headed for the exit, ignoring the reporters who tried to intercept me. Behind me, the ballroom was in complete upheaval. Security was trying to restore order while attendees argued and pointed at the screens. Vanessa caught up with me in the parking lot, running in her high heels and calling my name. "Colin, wait!" I stopped and turned around. She looked broken, destroyed, like everything she'd built her identity around had been stripped away. "Why?" she asked through her tears. "Why did you have to destroy everything?" "I didn't destroy anything, Vanessa. I just revealed what was already broken. You've ruined my career, my reputation, my whole life. You did that when you decided I wasn't worth being faithful to." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to find some angle, some way to manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now you face the consequences of your choices. Patrick's going to prison, Amy's unemployable, and you're going to have to figure out how to rebuild your life without stepping on other people to get what you want." "And us? Our marriage?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There is no us, Vanessa. There hasn't been for a long time. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise." I got in my truck and drove away, leaving her standing alone in the parking lot under the harsh glare of the streetlights. Behind me, the convention center was still blazing with lights as the scandal continued to unfold. By tomorrow morning, it would be front-page news. Patrick would be in jail, Amy would be hiding from reporters, and Vanessa would be discovering what it felt like to be the subject of industry gossip instead of the source of it. I drove home to my empty house, poured myself a beer, and sat in my garage workshop. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. The system had been debugged, the corrupted files deleted, and the network was running clean again. Justice, it turned out, was just another kind of code, and I'd finally learned how to write it properly.